Oplio. Today, on the 25th day of my action, I will list the economic benefits of a global population stabilization law. Number one, by bringing the population control program out in the open and empowering people to assume command and control over the sacred task of limiting human life on the planet, we would no longer need a military-industrial complex to act from behind the scenes and invent methods and means to sterilize and prematurely kill us. This would save us 5 to 20% of GDP, depending on the country. This would also ensure a much better use of human resources. As it is, males in the flower of their youth spend their best years polishing rusty tanks, while their superiors spend their professional lives waging war against fertility and longevity and perverting the truth to get away with genocide. All these males, now wasted on destructive ends, will be employed in honest and productive jobs. This will demilitarize our world and prevent the wasting of resources on the projection of power. Two, by no longer chronically poisoning us into sterility to reduce births and into immunodeficiency to increase deaths, medical costs will drop by at least 50%, since all chronic or non-communicable diseases we suffer from now due to chronic multi-generational poisoning with endocrine disruptors and due to periodic immunizations with depop vaccines would no longer debilitate the population. We would then save at least 5% of GDP. This money we now waste on hospitals and drugs, on doctors and nurses to cure or control diseases caused by the poisoning program will be better spent for preventive medicine, provided through pleasant means such as spa treatments, yoga and Pilates retreats, and annual paid holidays at hot springs, seaside and mountain resorts. This will revolutionize medicine and make disease almost non-existent. And since we will no longer have a medical profession and a chemical and pharmacological industry that set fire to our health to create more work and profits for themselves, we will no longer tolerate among us anyone who cannot carry their own weight and contribute to well-being, and who are instead lifelong burdens on society and on taxpayers. Anyone who is not able-bodied, independent, and capable of work will be euthanized. All fetuses found to have incurable congenital or genetic diseases or to suffer from physical deformities and handicaps that cannot be surgically corrected will be aborted. All adults suffering from incurable illnesses, disease, or disability are in an advanced state of irreversible decline of their normal faculties, are mentally retarded, or who endure intolerable physical or physiological suffering with no end in sight will be euthanized. Not only are such people condemned to a life of social exclusion, loneliness, and inadequacy on top of their physical suffering, but they also condemn their parents and siblings to a life of misery and sacrifices, and condemn society to bear the costs of supporting them for life. No one should be forced to sacrifice their lives to the lifelong care of human beings who are destined to die. This will relieve the healthy from having to provide lifelong care for the unhealthy and will restore their lives and individual freedom. Likewise, society must be relieved of the burden of the socially dysfunctional, repeat offenders, mass murderers, sexual predators who target children, psychopaths and sociopaths who commit serious crimes with dire consequences, hopeless drug addicts, and those who commit heinous crimes have no place among us, and instead of imprisoning them for life at exorbitant cost to the rest of us and making them suffer for the rest of their lives behind bars, it is far more humane and beneficial to euthanize them. This will allow us to shut down all prisons and replace them with healing centers for light offenders. This will free us of pathological crime and of the evil of prisons. These measures are necessary at a time when our civilization is being dragged down by the ever-increasing dead weights at the top from a malignant elite and at the bottom from a dependent segment of socially, mentally, and physically dysfunctional people. These measures are also necessary at a time when our planet is hopelessly overpopulated and mankind must reduce its numbers to a sustainable number or we will all perish. Three, by no longer having the deep state working against us and no longer being chronically poisoned, we would be always healthy and energetic and therefore far more productive. Through increased efficiency and decreased sick days, we would save another 5% of GDP. By no longer having to spend a good part of our lives suffering from illnesses caused by our elected leaders and their henchmen in the military-industrial complex, we would lead much healthier and happier lives too. This will restore our natural health and happiness. Four, by no longer having a social order where the institutions of the state work against us and create inefficiencies to justify hidden intent and crimes against humanity, the left hand would no longer be holding the right hand back. This will save us another 10% of GDP since everything in society would be working as it should, and the synergy of people, institutions, and organizations working towards the same goals in synchronicity would make for a far more effective and productive civilization. This will resynchronize our civilization. Five, we will get rid of layers and layers of parasites. The political class will be reduced by 80%. The military class will disappear. The medical class will be reduced by at least 50%. The judiciary class by at least 75%. Paper pushing will be replaced by wheelbarrow pushing among men, while among women, paper pushing will be replaced by strolling pushing. This will deparasitize and debureaucratize our world and greatly reduce our workload, making the 5-day work week unnecessary. All men now employed in professions misused for destructive ends will be redeployed towards constructive ends, such as the building of integrated and energy-independent cities and the building of a new energy infrastructure based on renewables. And all women now employed in professions misused for destructive ends will be redeployed towards child rearing and the building of happy and healthy homes. We need builders and mothers, not bureaucrats and toy soldiers. This will restore manhood and womanhood and transform our infrastructure. There will be no more children institutionalized in creches, daycare centers, and kindergartens. The 7 years of home education will be solely the responsibility of mothers and fathers. No child will see the inside of a classroom until they are at least 6 years old. You make them, you raise them, not the state. The state's responsibility is to provide women with a living wage for the duration of the breeding decade, from 20 to 30, when all women will be paid to conceive the healthiest children possible, to raise them in the most loving and stable homes possible, and to educate them in the most personal way possible. This will deinstitutionalize our children and restore childhood. Everything we build must be a work of art, not just an object of utility. And every child we raise must be an evolved version of their parents, and not just a new worker and consumer. By making better use of the human resources we have, and by raising superior descendants, the material benefits to society will be at least 20%. Civilization building and child rearing are to be seen and respected as sublime sciences and artistic endeavors all at once. This will beautify our world and edify our spirits. Number 6, there will be no need for the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few hundred billionaires so they can use the wealth we produce against us by funding covert chemical and biological methods of depopulation, starving families of the resources they need to be able to raise children, suppress wages, and twist the judiciary so it serves as a weapon of injustice so that people can be sterilized, sickened, impoverished, misinformed, and finally prematurely killed. As it is, nearly half the world's wealth that is now monopolized by a few hundred billionaires and a few multi-millionaires, all of whom are active or passive depopulationists, will pour back in our pockets. The best way to distribute wealth across society is according to the Ohm Principle 1, proportional income and equal taxation, which states the income gap will be addressed through universal rules and firm legislation that tie the highest earner to the lowest in every industry and between every industry, be it private or public, at a ratio of 1 to 10, and through proportional wage increases and profit-sharing programs across the board, and equal taxation limited at 25% of income. No more CEOs or bankers who earn 600 times an employee's salary. Exorbitant profits at the top will be replaced with prosperity for all by legislating that the highest earners cannot bring in more than 10 times what the lowest earners bring in. This will ensure that economic growth leads to an increase in prosperity across the board, and wealth will no longer be concentrated in a few greedy hands and destroy the principles of solidarity, equity, and justice. By redistributing 50% of the world's wealth from the 1% back to the 99% who produce that wealth, we will all become considerably richer virtually overnight. Since the world's wealthiest 1% hold 50% of the global wealth, thus circa $50 trillion, and the remaining 99% hold the remaining $50 trillion, the redistribution of the $50 trillion held by the world's wealthiest 1% would add circa $6,250 into the pockets of every man, woman, and child on the planet. For those who earn the equivalent of the global median GDP of $12,500, their annual incomes will grow by 50%. The only condition to this redistribution of wealth is that everyone will be obligated by law to invest 10% of their personal income into the development projects that are deemed crucial to civilization building. Otherwise, the capital markets would be deprived of the capital necessary to invest in every industry according to need. This will destroy the organized crime of colluding governments, organized religions and corporations, and universalize prosperity. Caution here, the people of the world must never, I repeat, never accept a population stabilization law without the redistribution of wealth and income stated in Ohm Principle 1. Otherwise, the super wealthy will find ways to circumvent replacement level fertility and required assisted dying. The current diabolical concentration of wealth is the malignant tumor that grows alongside covert depopulation. They both feed on the body of mankind and prevent civilizational progress. The only concession we may make along the way is to adjust the ratio from 1 to 10 to say 1 to 20, or perhaps even higher, if we find that the most talented among us need that financial advantage to put their ideas into practice for the benefit of all. 7. Wealth now held by the elderly and wasted on the extension of their dying period, which is what old age is, will be freed for the next generation to invest, live, create, and endow their children's education. This will free 50% of society's wealth to be used by the next generation when they need it most and when they can do the most with that money, which will increase economic activity by at least 10%. When people live to be 80, 90, or 100 years, whatever wealth they accrued during their lifetime will be exhausted long before they die, and the next generation, instead of inheriting wealth, will be forced to use the money they earn to fund the extended period of dying for the elderly parents and grandparents. As it is, wealth is not only wasted, but if any is left to be bestowed to the next generation, it is too late for the immediate children of the elderly to fulfill any personal dreams with that money, as they would inherit it when they are already of retirement age themselves. All wealth must therefore be transferred to the next generation by age 70, so the next generation inherits it at an age they can make best use of that wealth, namely between the ages of 40 and 50. That way, the flow of money from one generation to the next and the use of money by each generation would be ideal. We currently live in a civilization where the young serve the old. We will henceforth live in a civilization where every age cohort serves mankind as a whole through optimal use of resources for optimal outcomes at optimal times. This will re-optimize the flow of money between and within generations and boost economic activity. Another positive consequence of RAD 75, that's required assisted dying at age 75, will be that hundreds of millions of properties, homes, apartments, condominiums, cottages will be vacated by the elderly to be taken over by their grandchildren at the perfect age, around the age of 25, for starting their own families and having children. The young will be able to start their families mortgage-free, which will make it far easier to have children. This will unburden the young of debt, disimpoverish the poor, boost fertility, and raise the standard of living. A second positive consequence of this timely transfer of real estate from the elderly to their children or grandchildren is that it will greatly reduce the need for new construction and will save enormous amounts of natural resources, which will aid the decarbonization program and the consumption stabilization program. This will reduce consumption and pollution. Third, it will make speculation in the real estate market unprofitable and therefore unattractive, which in turn will greatly reduce the price of both old and new homes. This will end speculation, price gouging, and intergenerational theft in the housing market. And last, it will make it possible for every couple to upgrade their homes or build new homes without the need for bank loans. By being debt-free and mortgage-free from the start, every couple will be able to save the money they need to upgrade their homes or build new homes. No one should have to work and save for more than 10 years to build or purchase a home. This will end debt slavery and homelessness and strengthen social stability. 8. By living only to the age of 75, everyone will be an economic asset for society instead of a liability, since their productive years will at least equal their years of dependence. Considering that we spend the first 20 to 25 years as dependents, growing and learning, and the last 10 to 40 years as in retirement, depending how long we live, after the age of 60 or 65, nursing ailments and hopefully still enjoying life, also as dependents, we are a burden on society for anywhere between 30 to 65 years, while we are productive members of society for only 35 to 45 years. If the years of dependence exceed the years of production, then we are a liability for society. If everyone is a liability, then society collapses economically. And if a proportion is a liability while the rest are assets, then the liabilities are parasitizing the assets. The best structuring of every human life is to be productive for a longer period than dependent, as that would make everyone an asset, would create universal prosperity and constant economic progress, and will not create social divisions and dependencies. And for that to happen, it is best to spend the first 20 to 25 years of life growing and learning, and the last 15 years of life from the age of 60 to 75 in comfortable retirement. In this fashion, everyone will be a dependent for 35 to 40 years, depending on whether they enter the workforce at age 20 or 25, and a productive member for 40 to 45 years, once again depending on whether they enter the workforce at the age of 20 or 25. People in physically demanding professions would be active from the age of 20 to the age of 60, and intellectually demanding professions from the ages of 25 to the age of 65. The total years of productivity would be the same for both groups, namely 40 years, while the total years of dependence would also be the same, namely 35 years. What would differ is the distribution of the years of dependence, since those in physical professions will get 5 years of dependence longer than the intellectual professions at the end of life, from 60 to 65, because they retire 5 years earlier, while those in intellectual professions would get an extra 5 years in youth, from age 20 to 25, since they stay in school 5 years longer. Through this optimal use of the human lifespan, all people will contribute to society and benefit from it in equal measure. And all people will be assets for society, not liabilities. Through this optimal use of lifespans, we would gain at least 10% of GDP. This will re-assetize every human being. 9. Extending the working life past 65 would delay the entrance into the workforce of the next generation, which in turn would delay family formation and childbearing, therefore feeding a downward demographic spiral that can only end in population collapse. Therefore, no one will be allowed to work past the age of 65, even if they want to. The elderly can play advisory roles past age 65 if they so wish, roles for which they will receive no monetary remuneration. This will optimize the transfer of jobs from one generation to another, and will endow the young with wages sufficiently high to allow them to support a family and have children between the ideal age of 20 and 30, when the oocytes, that is to say the female eggs, are strongest and healthiest, and the parents themselves are strongest and healthiest, and can therefore endow their children with the best genetic inheritance. This will increase economic activity by at least 10% and rebalance political power between generations. This will re-optimize intergenerational productivity and restore the lost balance of power between generations. 10, and last, by optimally using human resources, by having a healthier and more productive labor force, by no longer having the state and the international system work against us, by creating synergy between the people and the state, by dissolving or diminishing the parasitical classes, by no longer concentrating the world's wealth into the hands of a few hundred billionaires and a few million multimillionaires, by ensuring that every person is an economic asset, not a liability, and by no longer feeding a downward demographic and economic spiral, we can double the world's wealth overnight and raise the global per capita GDP from about 100 trillion to 200 trillion, therefore eradicating absolute poverty once and for all. So the primary benefits of this will be an equitable, prosperous, and happy society. This will empower mankind. Yes, my friends, a world of universal prosperity is possible. Thank you for your attention.